Hi, and welcome to Answers News for July the 1st, 2018, brand new month. And,
yes, July already. What on earth?
I know. So July 4th this weekend, for those of you that are here in the United States, that is a celebration. I think it's our 263rd, I think I heard that, 263rd birthday here in the U.S. And so we'll be celebrating that. I know we've already had some fireworks displays around here. People kicking off a little bit early. We've got our fireworks, so we're ready to go. And we are online, and there we are on the Kinham page, as well as Answers in Genesis and the Answers in Genesis YouTube channel. So we're in all of those places, and so if you want to join us on there, it's just Avery and I again today, but we thought we'd like switch it up. So she would sit over here, and I would sit over here and introduce the articles.
We're messing everyone up by switching spots.
Yeah.
Have you ever sat that far over? Usually you're in the middle.
I'm sort of in the middle, which is where I normally actually sit. But when there's three of us, I don't know if I've sat all the way over here or not yet. So anyways, but so we're happy to be here today. And we have a couple of, I think, beginning items here. Let's see what the first one is. All right. So this is about 12 Stones Christian Academy, and that is a Christian school that is a subsidiary of Answers in Genesis, and it's here locally in northern Kentucky, and it is a K through 9 school this year, and so I serve on the board and several committees for the school, and it's just a great, great Christian school that teaches from a biblical worldview starting point. It's all about that biblical worldview education and all of our materials and all of our teaching, and so we are accepting applications for students. So if you live locally and are interested in having a great Christian education for your children, we encourage you to check out the website for more information on that, and we will also post a link. And I just got a text from Ken because I said, well, can I tell them you're not feeling well? And so he said, yes, that's fine. So he was supposed to be here today, but he wasn't feeling real well. And so, but hopefully he should be fine. So we'll look for him, not later this week, because July 4th, we won't have an Answers News on that day.
Yes, we're off.
But he should be back next week, because I'm on vacation, so I will not be here. I will be enjoying some nice vacation time. So, and then the next thing we have is our Pure Flix special. So this is basically, so how many of you know what Pure Flix is? Okay, so most of you do. And by the way, we have a wonderful, see, I forgot.
You even wrote it down in your paper.
I even write it down, and then
we had a whole conversation about how we weren't going to forget.
Okay, we have a wonderful studio audience, so let yourselves be known. Come on. There we go. It's a Monday, so you know. So anyway,
we'll blame it on that.
Yeah, that's what's happening. So Pure Flix is a Christian alternative to Netflix. So lots of family-friendly, faith-affirming movies on that particular streaming service. And the deal right now is that you can get 1 year of Pure Flix along with our great magazine, Answers Magazine, which is a full-year subscription to that, both print and digital, as well as a bunch of downloads, as well as our newsletter. I think I'm remembering almost everything.
I think
that's part of it, because there's a lot to it.
There is, yeah. It's an awesome deal.
It's an awesome deal for like $99. And so it's over $200 worth of items that you're getting for that price. So, and all of the Answers in Genesis DVDs are on the Pure Flix site. So it's like 500 DVDs. So basically, for the cost of less than 1 DVD a month, you can get all of that. And so
plus Answers Magazine and the downloads and all that other good stuff.
So there,
definitely want to check that out.
Post a link there, and you can go to the link and find out more information about that. Yep.
And Ken also sent us some pictures from down at the Ark that he took, I think, of just showing there's so many people down there and having such a great time and just loving being down there for the summer and enjoying everything the Answer Center has to offer now that we've got that open this summer. That's new this summer, and people enjoying the buffet and just having a great time.
Yeah,
so.
and we've got a lot of special things I know coming up this weekend for the holiday weekend.
Yes, yeah.
So check out our website for more information about that. I think, did Ken do a blog on that?
Yes, he did.
Ken did a blog, so if you check out his blog site, maybe we can put the link to that in there as well.
Concerts and comedians and all kinds of really fun stuff happening for the July 4th weekend down at the Ark. So, and then of course today being July 1st is Canada Day. So happy Canada Day to all my fellow Canadians and our faithful Canadian viewers. Hope you're having a great holiday. We got a few Canadians Canadians in the audience, so it's great to have them here too.
I asked her if she was going to sing "Oh Canada," but she said no. So.
See, I like our viewers. I want to keep our viewers, so I'm not going to sing.
We want people to keep watching. So,
yes, absolutely.
We won't do that. All right, so let's get to some of our articles here.
All right.
Okay, this first one, which I absolutely love, zebra stripes could be used to control their temperature, a study revealed. So there's always been a question about, like, why do zebras have these stripes? And they've wondered for years and years why.
Yeah, they always flip-flop back and forth. It's this, no, it's this, no, it's this.
Right. And so this study was actually done, and so the scientist that did this study is 85 years old.
I couldn't believe that. I looked up some more background on this, and it turns out when she was 70, her husband, as like a surprise trip, took her to Africa to go do research at 70 years old, and she's now publishing the results as an 85-year-old.
So that's pretty cool. So
yeah.
So what they have determined is they feel that there's at least maybe two things that are specific more to zebras, and then one thing that is general to all horses, basically, or all
zebras are in the horse kind.
Yeah, the horse kind. And so one of them is that the hairs there stand up when they're really hot, while the white ones remain flat.
Which they've never observed before. This is the first time this has ever been reported in literature.
Right. So they think that increases really cool. the circulation, obviously, because the hairs are standing up, increases the circulation. They also notice that there is a temperature difference. They think there's a temperature difference between the white and the black stripes, because black obviously absorbs more sun. And so they think that temperature difference makes kind of like a convection to cool them down, actually, as a result of that. And then the third thing was the lathrin that they have. Did you want to talk about?
Which I hadn't heard of before, but apparently all the members
horses.
of the horse kind have this protein called lathrin, which makes, you know how when you see a horse that's really hot, they've just been running or whatever, they're all like frothy looking and kind of like they have that weird frothy sweat. That's because of this protein lathrin, and it actually helps the sweat evaporate better and cools them off faster.
Right.
So
it gets them in lather, so they have like bubbles basically, and that increases the surface area, which cools them down. They also think it creates unstable air currents because the black has a different temperature than the white, and that causes the bugs not to be able to bite them.
So it was a really cool,
it's amazing.
Yeah. Who knew stripes could do so much?
Right. It's amazing design, okay? And they even talk about this in here. They say the solution to the zebra's heat balance challenge is cleverer, more complex, and beautiful than we'd imagined. Well, if you start from an evolutionary idea, sure, I'm sure this is probably pretty shocking that random chance could do this over eons of time, but it's actually beautifully designed and just a variation within the horse kind that helps them live in the very hot environments that they live in.
With the information God built into their DNA from the very begining.
Very cool stuff.
So, yeah, cool stuff. And it just was really cool that the scientist that did all this was 85. Like, that's just
really I hope I'm doing that good at 85, just saying.
You're getting surprise trips to Africa to study
I don't know if I want to do that, but I might take working in the lab, but I'm not sure about that. So.
Some people are saying Happy Canada Day here. So.
Oh, we have somebody on here. The girl power is back. My favorite team. Thanks. That's very sweet of you.
We'll be sure to tell Ken that.
Yeah, we'll be sure to tell him. He might not be so happy about that. But we got people on here from Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Alabama,
Wales, Australia,
Florida,
Missouri.
Oh, somebody said y'all are part of my weekly routine. I never miss an episode. Yes, I'm a nerd. LOL. So you don't have to be a nerd to watch this, though. All right. 2 small victories for religious liberty that you didn't hear about. So as we know, this is an ongoing topic, actually, when we try to bring up, especially when they've been successful, and even when they haven't, to help people know what's going on. But one of them, this came down from the Supreme Court because they've kind of made all their decisions now for the year that they're going to make. But one was a case about a atheist wanted them to remove "In God We Trust" from the coins, from our coinage. And he was the same atheist that wanted the Pledge of Allegiance removed from public schools because it says, under God. And so they said, nope. He said no, and with no comment.
Nope, they didn't even comment on it. They just refused to take the case.
So, yay, that's good. And then the other one was brought by the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and that was they wanted there not to be tax-exempt housing allowances for ministers. And so, but again,
they said that's unconstitutional to have.
Yeah, but they said
religion
no,
or whatever.
it's fine. So. But the FFRF, which they do a lot, the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
A group of atheists from Wisconsin.
Yeah, they don't like us. And so they're always speaking against us, so we're used to hearing their name. But they are a nonprofit. 501c3. C3, which means they are tax exempt. So see, they want to say, well, these ministers and their housing shouldn't be tax exempt because these are expressly religious institutions. Well, guess what the FFRF is? An expressly religious institution. And what is their religion? The religion of atheism. They are religious too. So if the tax exempt status for ministers goes, guess what? So should yours. So that's just, they want to say, well, we're being neutral, we're not being, but that's just not true.
No, they're trying to impose their anti-God religion on the culture. And you see that in all the different lawsuits they bring up of trying to get anything even remotely Christian removed. And they're constantly threatening different groups, don't bring groups to the Ark Encounter. Like if you're in any way associated with the government and you try and bring a group to the Ark Encounter, well, that's violation of church and state or whatever. And it's just... It's just ridiculous, not true at all. But so they're just trying to impose their secular view on the culture.
Right. They're trying to impose a religious view while trying to oppose a religious view, which is kind of interesting, but true. All right, let's go on.
But good to see some victories for religious freedom and seeing.
Can't keep up and talk at the same time. So. Let's see, Kansas City. Oh, somebody said who will do the puns today? Okay, so normally Bodie Hodge, when he's on here, he's been on vacation recently. Normally he does the puns. I do not do puns.
I don't really do puns either. So occasionally I'll have a brainwave, but not that often. So
it takes very clever people to do that, and I'm not one of those people.
I'm not one of those people.
Okay. Study reveals new genomic roots of ecological adaptation and polar bear evolution. Now, I had to kind of smirk somewhat at this title because they're going to put adaptation and evolution in the same sentence and act like they're the same thing, right? That's called equivocating. So they're going to say, but they're really two separate things and they're not alike at all, okay? Because adaptation leads to maybe small changes or animals adapting and dealing with their environment. Evolution is a change of one kind of organism to a completely different kind of organism. So those are two separate things. And even though they're going to try to call them the same. So they're talking about the brown or the grizzly bear versus the polar bear. And they're saying that they diverged from each other, okay, about 500,000 years ago, and that they become different as a result of that. Well,
particularly in their diet.
Right. It's not 500,000 years ago.
No.
Okay.
No.
It's
post-flood.
Yeah, flood. Since the flood time, they've diverged.
Maximum few thousand years.
So just about 4,000.
Part of the bear kind. They can breed together. There's growler bears.
There's growler bears,
So they can breed together, part of the same kind.
Bears are still bears, okay? So that's what this article shows. So what they found was that, so I'm trying to think how to explain this from a genetic standpoint. So
I was like, here comes the science part.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, because what they're looking at is something called copy number variations in bears. So what they found is that grizzly bears and brown bears have multiple copies of certain genes. Humans do this, humans have this too. We don't necessarily just have one copy of a gene, sometimes we have multiple copies of the gene. And what they found is that brown bears and grizzly bears have more copies of certain genes than polar bears do.
Especially ones for smelling and for things like that.
Right, and it's for their being able to produce certain salivary enzymes, okay? So polar bears have less, and brown and grizzly bears have more. So obviously that's evolution.
Because they lost something.
Yeah. And it's not. That's just...
No, it's just a loss of the genetic diversity.
It doesn't explain origin of it. It doesn't explain the origin of those genes or how they got there in the first place. It just explains that they lost it. And my guess is that they started out with all those copy numbers to begin with in the original bear kind, and then as they diverged and went to different places, the ones that went north, so to speak, lost certain amounts of those genes, which is okay. They still have those genes, they just don't have as many copies of them.
Right.
Because they don't, in the north, what are you gonna smell? Way up there.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're not searching for berries and roots and all the different things that the brown bears are searching for because their food is basically seals and things like that, and so they're just searching.
They can live fine without it.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the amylase, they probably don't need maybe as much variety in their enzymes to break down things because their diet is probably much more consistent.
Plant-based stuff.
Right. So it's not evolution, okay? I hate to burst their bubble, but it has nothing to do with evolution. It has everything to do with variation and adaptation within a kind, okay? Bears are bears, so...
And they can still breed together.
Yeah, and they're not becoming non-bears. This isn't leading them to become something other than that, so we need to remember that. All right, somebody's trying to come up with a pun for us. They said no puns on today's answers in Genesis are apologies, like apologetic. Okay, I don't think Bodhi would like that one. So
good try. We appreciate the effort.
Okay. Somebody else said with the last article, that's a polarizing issue.
That one's better.
That one's better. Thank you, Brian. That was a good one, actually. So, okay.
Now we're ranking puns on the show. What have we become?
We're not even going to try this. All right, new king of fossils discovered in Australia. So this is actually about a very large trilobite. Okay, and so this
is by trilobite standards.
Yeah, by trilobite standards, because we have. Oh, no, that's the horseshoe crab, isn't it? It's not a trilobite. But we have some fossils here of trilobites that you can see. Yeah. But this is, now I have trouble pronouncing this, Redlichia rex. Okay, so they're naming it kind of after T-Rex, Redlichia rex. And so this is the giant of all trilobites that supposedly first appeared in the Cambrian explosion. Okay, so
500 million years ago in their view.
Right. So just to put it in Genesis terms, okay, in creation
Putting it in a biblical worldview.
Right. It wasn't 500 million years ago, okay. The Cambrian explosion actually is sort of a snapshot, a series of marine ecosystems that were buried at the very beginning of the flood.
So you're looking at the beginning stages of the flood.
Right. Beginning stages of the flood about 4,300 years ago. So that's really what the Cambrian explosion is. It's not, evolutionists would say it's all when all these new life basically forms came into existence and then everything else evolved from them, right? No,
which is really hard for them to explain because they basically have to explain how every single major body plan that we have today, all of them evolved all at the same time. Right. And this new discovery of this trilobite
with no fossils leading up to it. Yeah. Basically. So.
Which makes much more sense in a biblical worldview where this is the beginning stages of the flood and doesn't make much sense in an evolutionary worldview. And this new find just adds more diversity, more for them to try and explain how this could have evolved so quickly.
Yeah, and they found like it had some soft parts that were fossilized, so its antenna and legs, which is actually extremely rare. Now, I will say it might be rare for soft body parts to fossilize, but it isn't actually rare to find soft tissue in fossilized bones. We find that in dinosaur bones and other things, which again really indicates they can't be millions of years old in order to have these kinds of things preserved and be able to find them and look at them. And so then they go into storytelling after that. So, well, they've already done a little bit of that, but they try to say that possibly these giant trilobites ate other smaller trilobites that they cannibalized, but I don't know how you know that.
I mean, they're basing it on coprolites, which is a fancy term for fossilized poop.
Study these things.
That contained fragments of trilobites. So clearly something was eating trilobites. And then they also found some other fossilized trilobites that had injuries caused by shell-crushing predators. And so they think, well, maybe this was the predator that was killing these other ones. But it could have been anything living in the ocean at the time. Like, that's pretty big leap. But I thought it was interesting. They're talking about fossilized poop, and they're talking about creatures that were literally injured and fossilized. Like, that's rapid fossilization. That isn't slow, gradual. We don't find excrement laying at the bottom of the ocean just waiting to be fossilized, right? Like, that it just gets eaten up by other creatures. That doesn't happen. And if something's injured, it gets eaten. It doesn't just, sit around and wait to be fossilized. So this points to catastrophe, to catastrophic processes.
And they want to kind of talk too about how the Cambrian explosion was kind of likely an evolutionary arms race. It was one of the drivers of that because all of a sudden you have all these different organisms and who's going to eat who and who's going to survive. But it's not that at all. Like we said, it's just burial of organisms at the beginning of the flood. But also, the fact that we do have like defenses, the fact that organisms do have defenses, like a trilobite with a hard shell is probably, it serves it well in a fallen world where it could get eaten
for his creatures.
God's providing for organisms even in a fallen world, so that's a good one. That's a good thing. All right, this next one, I don't even know how to. I feel like
every week we're like, just when you think you've seen everything,
you haven't.
You haven't, because now we're talking about gender fluid tomatoes.
No joke.
You just can't make this stuff up.
Meet Australia's new sex-changing tomato, Solanum plastisexum. All right? So, never in my life did I think I would be talking about
Welcome to 2019, folks.
Yeah. So they're talking about this tomato plant that they found in Australia that hasn't really been studied very much and hasn't really been classified because it's been challenging to classify it because its flowers tend to be hermaphroditic, which means they have both male and female reproductive function. And so, but only sometimes. Sometimes they're
just male. Sometimes they said they kind of show features of both. Yeah. They're really puzzled by this tomato. It's just
they don't
really
understand
weird.
it, but here's the kicker, right? This will shed light on the diversity of sexual expression in the plant kingdom, as well as challenging the notion of normative sexual conditions for other living things. So because a plant can be both male and female, obviously that means it's normal for human beings to be that way too, or to change.
And this isn't just the New York Times spinning this story. This is literally the researchers saying this. They went on to say, when considering the scope of life on Earth, the notion of a constant sexual binary consisting of distinct and disconnected forms is fundamentally a fallacy. So because there's a tomato plant that is weird, that means that everything we understand about biology is just, it's fundamentally a fallacy when it comes to the issue of male and female. What?
This is crazy. Well, that's what I say. I say a lot. The extrapolation of this is insane, right? That's the problem with it. And they talk about plants and animals having diverse sexual forms. Okay, here's the deal. Yes, there are some plants and animals that are hermaphroditic or can change from one sex to the other, okay? But that's things like fish and snails and frogs and crustaceans, okay? It's extremely rare in mammals. It's once in a while seen in birds, but usually not. And the reason for that in these other organisms, it's a survival mechanism. Like God has literally built this into these organisms, like a clownfish that's on the reef, okay? And so another clownfish comes along. Let's say its mate dies, and so it doesn't have a mate. Another clownfish comes along. They're both male. Guess what? One will change to a female, so they can mate and produce offspring. Okay,
but it's a biological response to some kind of environmental stimuli. It isn't this idea of gender fluidity that is common today, that you can be anywhere on this spectrum, regardless of biology. This is literally a biological response in these plants, these animals, because of some kind of stimuli.
And it's not like the organism goes, gee, I want to be a female now, or gee, let's be a male. You know, it's doing that. This is inbuilt design. And they say, you know, well, the sexual expression in these seems to be unpredictable. Well, it's okay, but you have barely studied it. So I'm betting it's predictable. I'm betting there's a good reason it does what it does. You just don't understand it yet.
The end of this article, just like they're talking about how they're hoping that this will help shift the dial on conversations beyond their field, which is clearly referring to moving into the humans and human sexuality. Plants really make an excellent example of what's possible and what's normal
for everything else, for humans.
We're talking about plants, which are a totally different kingdom from us because they're so different from us. Like,
how can you? But I think too. Like when I read that, I thought this is insane, right? But starting with evolutionary assumptions, this makes sense.
We're related
because they believe that we started, I mean, there was a single-celled common ancestor that relates both plants to animals. So it makes sense in their worldview to try to relate these two things, even though it might seem really bizarre to us. I mean, and they said it's exciting that there's things in this world that have yet to be named. I agree. God's diversity is amazing that he has created. And we need to understand this tomato plant more and why it does what it does. But that doesn't mean it has anything to do with what is normative. And they even said that it's fairly unusual what they're seeing in the species. Well, if it's fairly unusual and rare, then how is it normative in human beings somehow? I mean, the logic is it's not logic, it's illogic what they're doing here. And it's just absurd. So
no matter how many weird tomato plants they find in Australia's outback, we are created male and female. Genesis 1:27 tells us that pretty clearly. It will not change genetics and biology when it comes to human beings created in the image of God.
And you can't, and I will honestly say, the more and more I study this, as a biologist, I am just abhorred at how these people, they're science deniers. They call me a science denier. They're a science denier. They're a biology denier, right? I mean, this is like observational fact that people are male or female. I mean, and now I know there are some rare cases where things are a little bit, challenging. Maybe it's because we live in a fallen world and that happens and that's sad and all, but it's not normal.
Yeah, right? And even in that case, you're talking about something that's physiologically wrong. You can't take that and say that because there are physiological differences, that means that
and it's rare.
This idea that you can have this psychological issue.
Right.
That means
totally
gender's on a
different.
spectrum. They're two totally separate things. People like to conflate the two, but you can't. You can't do
it's
that
totally different things.
Yeah.
Somebody said the newest version of VeggieTales. Oh, please.
Someone overhears that if you want to talk to
I
tomatoes. Now I'm going to have the VeggieTales theme song stuck in my head all day.
Oh, somebody said, I like this one. The only fluidity of tomatoes that is important is called ketchup. Now that's a good one. I like that.
There are so many weird things in Australia. Yeah.
Ken Ham. No, okay, no, sorry. Hopefully he's not watching today. Okay. All right, this next one, I love it. I love when they find these organisms. Okay, bizarre skull belongs to the first known beluga narwhal hybrid, right? So I am calling this a narluga. Okay, I'm going to name the hybrid because I haven't seen it named anywhere else, so I'm going to name it.
Yeah, they just keep calling it, they just keep hyphenating it. That's boring, come on.
Hyphenate it, just call it the
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opopportunity.
Right. So narwhals and belugas actually both belong to the same family, which is Monodontidae. Okay, what it means, one tooth, basically, because the narwhal has like one tooth, really.
The big tusk.
Yeah, the big tusk, that's actually a tooth. And so they both belong to the same family. So when we talk about biblical creation, we talk about God creating animals according to their kind. And we would put kind usually at the family level because most members of a family in the animal kingdom, even if they're different genus or species, can typically mate with one another and produce offspring. And these are called hybrid animals. And so these are members of the same family, which is likely the same kind. So they had the same ancestor about 6,000 years ago when God created the organism. And because they're marine creatures, they didn't die off, obviously, during the flood, because we still have them around today. They weren't on the ark or anything. And so we find these guys. And this was actually first discovered in 1990. It was never seen, it was seen alive, obviously, by people at that time. But it was
a substance hunter who killed 3 of these, and somehow one of the skulls survived and ended up in a museum collection somewhere. And finally they were like, let's do some DNA. Now that DNA testing has improved, let's do some DNA testing on this and figure out, is it actually a hybrid? And
because that's what it looked like.
Yeah, the DNA showed that the mother was a narwhal and the father was a beluga.
Yeah, so it definitely is a hybrid, and they're surprised by this. Okay, so the evolutionists, like, this is weird to them because they say they're two species. They're not really closely related. They diverged from a common ancestor 5 million years ago. So they're like, how is it possible for them to mate and produce offspring? Because it wasn't 5 million. Okay, that's why it was like 6,000.
And they point out, just to make the point of how long in an evolutionary worldview 5 million years is, they say that's the last time humans and chimps shared a common ancestor. So like, just like humans and chimps are so different, then we should expect these whales to be so different. And it's like, well, your worldview is wrong, and that's why your conclusions about that are not going to be correct. And you're shocked by this. We're not shocked because they're part of the same created kind. So, and this confirms that. Then they can, we see that they can interbreed. So we're not surprised to see that.
And they've got a lot of characteristics as they study them that are really hybrid between the two.
Yeah.
Their eating habits are different from both.
Because the teeth are like really weird. The teeth aren't like.
Right. The teeth are really weird. They don't have like a single tooth like the narwhals do, but their teeth they do have are funky looking.
So it has to like eat differently because it can't eat like the other ones. And then the coloring is like, instead of being white or being like kind of splotchy, they're just like kind of a gray color. And they have front flippers like a beluga, but a tail like a narwhal. So they're this is a really cool mix of.
And so they're even finding today that there was like an abandoned narwhal that ended up joining a bunch of belugas. They actually accepted it. And so there's some indication, so to speak, of this today. But it does say that it's important to, for museums and stuff to keep things like this that maybe are odd, but we don't have the ability to study because we don't have the technology, because later we might, and then we can study this and we can find out more about the animal kinds, which is really neat from a creation perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there are other whale hybrids. This isn't the first. And it certainly won't be the last, but a really cool one.
Yep, really neat. All right, this next one. Breast milk is teeming with bacteria that's good for the baby. So what we find out more and more when we study, like, human beings are made up of more bacterial cells than we are human cells, just so you know.
You're more bacteria than you are you.
You are more bacteria than you are human. So outside and inside, you have a lot of colonizers, and that's good because the good bacteria mean that the bad bacteria stay at bay for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still get infections and things, but you would be amazed at how they're keeping everything in check. And so what this article is talking about is how they've now studied breast milk, specifically fresh breast milk, and determined that it is like teeming with with all of these really, really good bacteria for the baby. So
yeah, it was so cool. Like the more that we study what God has created, the more just blown away we are by his design, and just looking at just something that seems as simple as a mother feeding her child, and just knowing that what's actually going on there to create, because the baby obviously isn't born with a microbiome because they're in an environment, a sterile environment until they're born. And so when they're born, pass through the birth canal, they start to pick up their microbiome. And as you cuddle them and kiss them and all that, they start to get more of their microbiome. And then as they nurse, they're also getting all of these bacteria. And what just blew my mind when I was reading this.
And they need that microbiome.
Oh,
like
it's
that's
very
the bacteria
important,
that inhabit the skin, the intestine, all of that, because as they study more and more the microbiome and the specific species that people have and all of that and the numbers that they have, they're finding it's linked to disease. It's linked to obesity. It's linked to a lot of things. And so it's important that especially babies start out with that microbiome that's good, so that it gives mothers and fathers even more reason to kiss and
cuddle your little baby,
because you're smearing them with bacteria, basically.
Which is a good thing.
But
sounds bad, but it's really
a good thing. So you want them to have that, actually. And I'm not the bad ones, obviously, but the good ones.
If you have a cold, don't kiss the baby. We're not advocating you kiss your baby when you have a cold, but
they talk about, though, but what gets me, and like what she's been saying about being designed, of course, this is an evolutionary mechanism, right? They have to attribute this to evolution.
And what blew my mind about this, though, like it gets even crazier. They're talking about how one of the bacteria that's really important, bifidobacteria, am I saying that right? That actually can sense, as you get towards the late stages of your pregnancy, it actually senses changes in your hormones and starts to replicate really, really fast, so that by the time the baby's born, there are loads of these bacteria ready to go, pass through the breast milk to get to the baby. Like, it literally senses your hormones. Like, and then they're like, oh, this is an evolutionary mechanism. I'm like, no, it's not. It was designed by a very good creator. Like,
well, it says a woman's breast milk has a lot of different hormones, antibodies, and bacteria, a brew that presumably evolved to meet the needs of her child. I don't know what the kid did before then, but until it evolved, they were without it, I guess. But again, it's that whole idea of how is the child going to wait until mom evolves to the point of being able to produce things it needs. So it's that whole problem. But it just goes into how God has designed all of this, and it's absolutely perfect. And we're not saying, and I want to caveat a little bit here, we're not saying that we're saying you must breastfeed, okay? We're not saying that. I want to caveat that because obviously there's lots of other ways that children, I was not a breastfed baby, and I'm fine, I think. And so there's lots of other ways, like I say, holding, touching, kissing, a lot of other ways that the babies can get that, even through what they eat and stuff, formulas and stuff are trying to put those kinds of things in. And so they're going to be perfectly fine, but they're just saying that this is really, it's really interesting to see. And to see how it's designed,
and just they even talk here about how a woman's breast milk is unique to each woman too, which is really cool. And so they're like, it's hard to replicate in formula because it's different for each person. Someone asked here, does any of that pass through the placenta? And they actually mentioned in here they think there is some bacteria that might get to the baby through the placenta, but they're not. They're still doing more study on that. So
I wanted to mention just one book before we go here. This is How Many Animals Were on the Ark. And so we talked about the Beluga Narwhal hybrid, and this book will go into some more detail about that and how we know what the original kinds are. And it has great artwork, and it's very easy to read and understand. We really worked hard at that. Here it talks about the horse kind. And
we talked about those and the bear kind as well today.
Yeah. So lots of great information in there. So you want to check that out. We'll put a link to that there. And we are out of time. We will not be here on Thursday because it's July 4th. We're all on holiday. So go out and
celebrate the American holiday.
Yep. I know you're a Canadian, but you're here now, so you have to celebrate this. So
hey, my daughter's American, so in honor of her, we'll celebrate.
So we'll be back, or somebody will be back here on Monday at 2:00. So we'll see you then.